Welcome back to the Zone. Again, Sterling Holmes filling in for Jason Anderson here live at the OP Convention Center. Open season Sportsman's Expo going on starting from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. today, presented by Progressive and Can-Am. Joined now as we head behind enemy lines, my guy Murf with Raiders Fan Radio. Murf, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Sterling. And before, first off, thank you for having me. But before we get to, before we get into it, I got to congratulate you not only on your in the Super Bowl, but your appearances there and you representing there on Radio Row. That was really cool, man. Seeing you there, and I really enjoyed the fact that you got to talk to a lot of Raiders.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that. Yeah, I tried swaying Max Crosby. It wasn't going to work. I will let you know I tried my best, Murph, but Max Crosby is a Raider through and through.
He's the man. Absolutely the face of our football team, and we're proud as heck to have him.
All right, I want to talk to you about the offseason so far for the Raiders, what they have coming up, little bit of an AFC West roundup here. What are some big pieces that are free agents for the Raiders? Who do you guys think you're keeping, and who do you guys think will be walking?
Well, the biggest name is Josh Jacobs. That's obviously going to be a focal point for us. We didn't apply the franchise tag, which is interesting, which we know is about $12 million. So I'm suspecting that he's going to maybe get a deal somewhere in a range of like a 2 or 3 year offer, maybe with like that 12 or 13 guaranteed, something like that. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. And there's also a lot of talk amongst Raider Nation that he's a favorite of owner Mark Davis. We know that Mark Davis gets attached to players. It's frankly one of the things that his dad criticized him about was that he gets attached to players. That could be a good thing or a bad thing, depends on how you want to frame it. But we know that he's a fan of him. We know that Antonio Pierce is a fan of Josh Jacobs. So we're really, as Raider fans, we're really hoping that we retain Josh Jacobs, and really it'll be nice, I think, obviously he'll want all the production, but we're looking at maybe even seeing like a split workload between him and Zamir White. So it should be interesting for us there. But in terms of targets for the Raiders, boy, it's all over the place. We sure could use to have a little more help on defense. Your guy Chris Jones gets talked about quite a bit. Of course,
don't you dare!
Wouldn't that be amazing? Hey, what else does he have to accomplish? He's already beaten every other team in the NFL. Now it's time to beat the Chiefs. Go team up with Max Crosby there on the line. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, maybe fantastic for you. I will also point out, I was a little befuddled by Tom Telesco. I don't think we've talked since Tom Telesco took over as the GM of the Raiders. 10 years as a GM with the Chargers, noted a lot of success there, obviously, right? I'm a little surprised by this move. What's the thought process in Las Vegas with Telesco getting the gig?
Well, it's interesting. He's got a pretty good track record in terms of early picks, but in the later rounds, it's typically where we see in his career that it's fallen off. But it's an interesting move for the Raiders in terms of getting a seasoned general manager in there. But listen, I've looked at it like this. He's got now his legacy as a GM is now going to be tied to what he does with the Raiders, along with Antonio Pierce. His legacy is going to be tied. He's a first-year head coach. He's already, people have questions around that and questions around, his ability to, manage games and the things that typically, younger head coaches, or at least early in their head coaching career, get criticized for. So when it comes to him and Telesco, really they're tying everything to this year. So Telesco's got, he's not going to get another shot as a GM if he fails on this one. So I think that he's really going to have to, he's going to have to do a good job. And it starts off by what we do at quarterback. That's going to be a big thing for our team this year. And I don't think it's going to be somebody like, a Band-Aid. Even Antonio Pierce has said that. So I think that a guy like Telesco is probably going to be coming out swinging for the fences on a QB, and that's what's going to define his success with the Raiders.
Well, who's he going to take a swing on? Are they in the market for, let's just say, hypothetically, Justin Fields? I feel like that might be the type of guy. I don't see Kirk Cousins making a lot of sense in Las Vegas. I still think Kirk Cousins, to me personally, seems like an Atlanta Falcon at this point. But as far as free agents, not a lot of great free agent quarterbacks, obviously. Are you talking more draft, or is it going to be a guy that maybe they try and see the top-end potential of a Justin Fields?
Yeah, no, I think they're going to swing forward in the draft. There's been a little bit of talk about Russ maybe visiting the Raiders. I don't see that as a fit at all. Just the entire shift of the culture shift that's happened with the Raiders in the locker room and around the organization. I don't see Russ fitting into that mold. So I believe it's going to be in the draft. And, we're drafting at 13, so we're already kind of in striking distance of getting one of the top guys in the draft. Of course, we know Antonio Pierce has a relationship going back with Jaden Daniels, so that would really be the dream pick, I think, for all of us. That's kind of the one we're hoping for. But that's going to take the Raiders moving up to 2 or 3. And, you got to have somebody that's willing to trade with you. Are the Raiders going to be willing to give up, as much draft capital is going to be required to get up there? Then, that's where I say take a swing. And I think that ultimately, again, going back to the legacy thing, that if these guys are tying the success of Antonio Pierce as a first-year full-time head coach and Tom Telesco as a first-year GM for the Raiders, they're going to be tied to the success of this draft and what that quarterback's going to do, because that's really what Aiden O'Connell's a nice player. We're fans of Aiden O'Connell. I know you guys in Kansas City are all big fans of him since he's the last quarterback to deliver you a loss on Christmas Day. Merry Christmas. But there's a. But he's only going to carry us so far, and so I think that he's a good young man. He's got a great work ethic. He's got some talent. He's got some arm strength. But in terms of his mobility and whatnot, there's just too many questions around it. So all that said, I think they're going to make a big move for a quarterback. We're all hoping it's Jaden Daniels, but could it be a Drake May? Michael Penix obviously shot up after his combine performance. Could it now be J.J. McCarthy? Speaking of guys that shot up in combine performance, it might only take the Raiders moving up to like 5 or 7 to get one of those guys versus shooting for, number 3 to try to go get Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, Aiden O'Connell, by the way, told me I had a nice mustache when I talked to him on Radio Row, which that was very nice. I don't know if anyone's ever seen Aiden O'Connell's mustache. Look it up. It's a little wispy going on right there. I will also point out, I brought up to him, I go, congrats on beating the Chiefs, but how did you beat the Chiefs without completing a pass from the second quarter on? And he had a good little chuckle at that. I want to get to Antonio Pierce's comments right there, because he said that was the blueprint. They have the blueprint for beating the Kansas City Chiefs, and the rest of the NFL should take notice. I thought that was absurd. That was asinine. I go, so the blueprint is you score 2 defensive touchdowns? Well, no bleep, Sherlock. Of course, if you get that, you are going to win. If you don't win, something has seriously gone wrong. The blueprint's not completing the pass from the second quarter on. What did you make of the Antonio Pierce comments?
Well, there's a lot of comments that Antonio Pierce has made that have come under criticism from different members of the media. And I wouldn't expect you or any other Chiefs fan to care for that. But I think the idea is that, your guys were out physical that day, and that doesn't really happen. And that you don't see that. And even Andy Reid, speaking of taking shots, took shots at the Raiders by saying, hey, thanks for that butt whooping on Christmas Day. That really motivated us to take a different approach or whatever. But I think that's what he's gearing at, is that those 2 defensive scores and that came on the heels of a defense that really got after your team that day, put their hands on Patrick Mahomes a bunch, and nothing says swaggering boisterously more than Jack Jones picking off Patrick Mahomes and staring him down as he's running into the end zone. So that was a pretty big day for us as Raider fans, and at the end of the day, you guys won the Super Bowl, and so somebody's got to still knock you guys off your pedestal. But I think that we're going to be the ones to do it. I think it's always been that way, too. It's like we as Raider fans are tired of rooting for other teams to beat the Chiefs. It's our turn. We got to make sure we take care of business this year.
Murf, come on. Of course, we're talking behind enemy lines with Murf with Raiders Fan Radio right here on the Zone Sports Radio 810 at WHB. I get it. The Broncos are done. Broncos are toast. They made that very clear with the releasing of Russell Wilson and the $85 million dead cap hit they are taking on. Chargers, they're in complete rebuild mode. Yeah, they have Justin Herbert. That's great. But let's be real. They're aging. They're over the cap. They don't look like things are headed in the right direction. The Raiders are the only team that at least has a somewhat positive trajectory. But they still seem like a far cry away from Kansas City. What are expectations for the Raiders this upcoming season, or is it really hard to say without a quarterback?
No, I think it's playoffs. It's we finished just on the outside looking in this last year. It was clearly a different football team. Antonio Pierce went 3-1 in the division, during his time last year, and that's what it's going to take. With the one, of course, coming from you guys the first time we played you, but that's what it's going to take for us to knock you guys off your pedestal. And I think that's if we can have a winning record in the division, then we're having a whole different conversation next year about this Raiders-Chiefs rivalry. And so, I think the expectation is playoffs. I think that, look, you guys are going to be the favorite in the division. So even if we concede that, so we're a wild card away. I think it's only going to take 10 wins, for us to do that, and that's only a 2-game improvement over last year. So, I think that it's the Raiders, even despite the gaping hole we have at quarterback, but despite those questions, you look at the turnaround that the Texans had last year by adding a player like C.J. Stroud. I think that's kind of we're on the precipice of something like that because our defense is solid. You had a couple of veteran pieces to our defense, and that's going to be a solid D. We got to shore up the offensive line, got to take care of quarterback, and a few other positions, interior defensive line. Outside of that, Sterling, I think that we're going to have a good football team next year. But I say that every year because I'm a delusional Raider fan. I think we're going to win the Super Bowl every year.
I was going to say, outside of shoring up the defense, shoring up the offensive line, adding some pieces offensively, and getting a quarterback, they're right there.
We're right there, buddy. See? I'm so glad you see it, by the way.
Just that many things. By the way, I got to ask this. I heard a rumor that the chief flag that was planted under Allegiant when it was being built somehow was taken out. Have you heard this? Is that unfounded? Because I don't know how you would take that flag out.
No, I always heard it was buried in the concrete or whatever, but I'll have to dig in. I'll have to tap my sources, which is the internet, and see if I can figure that out.
Yeah, I was going to say, I saw some Raiders fans. I brought that up when I was down there, and they were they're like, no, man, it was taken out. And I go, I don't believe you. If it's in concrete, you're taking Allegiant down just to get that flag out? No, man, I don't think that's happening. I want to keep touching on Antonio Pierce because, again, you're right. He's boisterous. He's out there. But he seems to me the perfect fit for the Raiders, the perfect fit for Las Vegas. The players seemingly love him. My one concern is it all an emotion thing here? Like, are the players just enamored with him because of the emotion or because he's an actual good head coach? Like, my thought is if Antonio Pierce went to, let's just say, the Falcons, right? No one's sitting here going, great hire by the Falcons. Like, I think the Raiders probably got it right with keeping AP because it keeps the players happy. But also my thought is he even a good head coach, or is this all just emotion?
That's a great question, and I thought a lot about that too. Of course, we know emotion is fleeting, and you can't just be fueled by that constantly. At some point, you got to have the preparation and the study and everything else that comes along with it to propel long-term success. I mean, look at Bill Belichick. That guy is devoid of emotion, and he's got more Super Bowls than anybody. So, but I do think that there was definitely an excitement around that. What I think the component is that's unique about Antonio Pierce is that I mentioned the culture shift, and there was a seismic culture shift going from a guy like Josh McDaniels to Antonio Pierce. We heard Antonio Pierce's comments on the Pivot podcast talking about that fateful day when Josh McDaniels decided to call a players-only meeting, and it blew up in his face. And in that moment is when Antonio Pierce became the head coach. And so, what that culture shift does is it allows our players to be themselves. And I think that's one of the things, and that's a Raider thing, right? Like, you can go back to the earliest days of the Raiders, and Al Davis's entire philosophy was just let your guys be your guys and just let them be there. Madden famously only had 3 rules for the Raiders. Be on time, pay attention, and play like hell when I tell you to. Like, that's it. So there's a lot of freedom in that. And so I think that spirit still rides in the Raiders. But we haven't had coaches that have represented that in a hot minute. Probably since the first Gruden, run, maybe a little bit with Jack Del Rio when we were playing pretty well before Derek Carr broke his leg. But so outside of that, just the spirit of the Raiders, I think, is what he represents. And there are even some folks too, even within our own fan base, that are critical of the idea that, all that builds culture is wins. That's all people care about is just wins. Well, I agree, but I also believe that if you have a positive culture within your organization, that leads to success. And then one of my favorite sayings is, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You can be the biggest guru in the world, a la Josh McDaniels, and be a complete failure. Or you can have somebody that can build a strong culture in your organization, which a head coach is almost like a CEO, because he's not a play caller. He's not like Andy Reid, right? He built a strong culture in the organization, and then that's what led to him having a successful, run as an interim coach and leading to him, getting the job as a head coach. So I think that's what he is, and the spirit of Antonio Pierce is just what the team needs. I'll say this, I'll shut up. It feels like the first time in a very long time. The front office, the coaching staff, the players, and the fans are all connected on the same page. We all have that same feeling about the team.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're hoping it's almost like the Lions with Dan Campbell. Obviously, it's not going to be Andy Reid. It's not going to be Bill Belichick. It's not going to be a head coach who is going to have a lot of the offensive or defensive thoughts on his plate, the game plan on his plate. It's going to be more of a CEO type and a guy that the players rally behind, but that means you have to get the right guys in place. That means you have to have your Ben Johnson as your OC. It'll be interesting to see if they can get the right coordinators in place for the Raiders. Again, we're talking right now with Murf from Raiders Fan Radio. Murf, always a pleasure. And by the way, I was bummed I didn't see you in Vegas to try out that Woodson bourbon.
I know, man. I owe you that bottle of whiskey. You got to send me your address so I can get that thing sent over to you. But it was pretty cool. It's pretty cool seeing the Allegiant Stadium on display. It was a little sad to see it in red and yellow and red and gold. It was like we couldn't pick two worse teams as Raider fans to have in our locker room and on our field. But it was still nice to see Allegiant Stadium in Vegas on display. I heard it was an amazing experience there, and hopefully Vegas will get the Super Bowl again.
Hey, Murph, really appreciate it, man.
All right, brother. Good to talk to you, Sterling.
You as well. If you guys want to follow him on Twitter, on the X, good Raiders follow, _MURF, Murph with Raiders Fan Radio. Good dude. Yeah, he lost a bet with me. Was it Woodson bourbon or Woodson whiskey? I forget even what the bet was, but I somehow won a bet with him, so I got some bourbon coming my way.